last weekend, everybody was in, well, everybody who was anybody. Of course, I wasn't there. You weren't there. Nobody I know was there. But all of the leaders of the world were in France for the reopening of the Cathedral of Notre Dame. And it's supposed to be marvelous, wonderful, and, way ahead of schedule, etc. But I heard at the beginning that they were going to make this kind of into a temple of reason again and kind of finish what the French Revolution started. And they restored part of it, but there was a big argument of, do we go modern or do we put the Gothic back in? And I hate this. I have no problem with modern architecture. But there is, Jefferson said, if you want your civilization to survive even beyond you, you must embed your principles in your architecture. Okay? Greece, we get it because of their architecture, a lot of it. The medieval times, we get it because of the architecture. And maybe it's time for all of us to go modern because so much of it makes no sense that you're like, yep, well, that's a sign of our times. Duncan Stroik, he is an architect, and I wanted him on to talk about what did they do to Notre Dame in the end. Duncan, welcome to the program.
It's great to be here, Glenn. I've really enjoyed your recent programs, especially with this great time of emphasis on the Nativity.
Well, thank you very much. So Notre Dame, the last time that it was that I know of that it was really desecrated and almost destroyed was during the French Revolution, and they wanted to make it a temple of reason. And then I heard they were going to do this again, and it was going to be to, the earth and all of this crap. Did any of that happen? And what changes did they make to the cathedral?
That's a great point. I agree with you that our great cathedrals, especially in the Gothic period, have had three enemies: fire, vandals, and iconoclasts. Mm. And poor Notre Dame has had all of those, and the fire was devastating. But what makes it even more painful is that after the fire did its work, that the iconoclasts came in and wanted to vandalize.
And was it, because I know there was this big panel put together and everything else. Was there anybody that actually in France believed in God that was on the architectural board?
I think there is, but they're not supposed to admit to it. There's a wonderful interview with Philippe Villeneuve, who was the head architect and who really fought to restore it the way it was, especially the spire, the 19th century spire. And I give him the major credit for the restoration and preventing the vandals and the iconoclasts from doing their work. But Philippe never said anything, and I talked to him in person a couple of times. He never said anything about God or about faith. But there's a recent interview with him, and he admits that he has faith, that was kept him going during these last 6 years, and also that the Mother of God helped him immensely in rebuilding this little church.
I can't imagine what it was like being a God person, rebuilding the most famous cathedral in the world and not be able to say, hey, there's some God stuff here in this Gothic architecture we may not want to lose. So
exactly. And it's so amazing because Macron, the president, he, originally he wanted to have a competition to redo the outside of it and do something 21st century, something of our time. And the elites and the architects were, excited, greedy little animals wanting to eat up this beautiful building. And fortunately, the people of France fought that. But he did not give up. Every step of the way, he says, well, could we have a competition to redo the stained glass? Could we have a competition to redo the side chapels? Could we, anything he could do to get the contemporary in there? And unfortunately for him, not for me, but for him, the contemporary means the secular.
So what is massively different when you go there now?
I think Philip Villeneuve got 98% of it. I mean, he really succeeded.
Oh.
They rebuilt the roof exactly the way it was, including with medieval axes. They rebuilt the spire the way it was in 1860 with handmade joinery, wood joinery. They redid the lead roof, which is very handmade, very phenomenal. They redid all the stonework, the 5 huge openings in the ceiling that had been destroyed. They restored and cleaned some of the side chapels and the paintings, which just are, were kind of dark before. Now they're beautiful. So he got 98% of it. Macron got very little. The elite art world that doesn't go to church, doesn't believe in church,
right,
but, are very influential. They got very little. But unfortunately, the Archbishop of was philosophically, or at least aesthetically, in league with Macron. So some of the things that he spent money on are of the contemporary, and most people won't even give them a second thought because they are so out of touch with the rest of the building.
That's actually good news, because I thought a lot more had been done that was bad. So this is really good to hear.
It's a great story. It really is. I'm very thrilled.
Yeah.
In spite of these little minor interior decorating things that look like they're ephemeral and you can get rid of them next year, it really is a triumph.
So you're a professor of architecture at the University of Notre Dame, and I want to ask you, so much of our architecture is just meaningless, and I'm not against modern architecture. Some of it is interesting, only because of what we can now do, but it doesn't really even speak to anything, a century from now, I don't think. But I was reading that there is this new AI-driven machinery that can now recarve from solid marble in a fraction of a time and not even close to the cost. You could rebuild all of the great statues and go back to even a gothic kind of architecture at a fraction of the cost and the time. But I kind of think when you see David, I have to tell you, I went to Florence and my wife and I stood in the square. I didn't know that the one in the square was a fake. And we were standing in the square and I went, well, I've seen that before in all different sizes, and it wasn't that impressive. And then I went into the museum where the original is, and I cannot tell you what the difference is, but that one is alive. The other one is not.
Yes.
What is the difference? And will, by getting rid of handmade things, don't you think that just changes absolutely everything?
Totally. And especially when it comes to art, with sculpture, with decoration, with figures, with floral things, the hand is where it's at. And we use modern technology to cut our marble and our limestone. But the thing that gets me so excited is to see that guy with his hands actually cutting into the stone and making an acanthus leaf. No question with sculpture. I believe totally with sculpture that it's the key. And so, yes, the David is a great example because there's a couple of great copies in Florence. And the one that we're all moved by is the one by that Michelangelo guy.
And
why is that? Because
they look identical.
Yes, totally. And they were great. They were very good sculptors who did it, and they were copying it as closely as they could. And so there's something beautiful about the hand. I'm with you, and I really want to. And they did that as much as they could at Notre Dame in this new restoration. And I think we want to. And young people were involved in it. That's what's also exciting is that young people today want to do things with their hands. Some people do. Other people want to do video games, but I think there's a good future for a lot of this.
Yeah, I think the more we get into AI, there's going to be a a real problem of dislocation of people and artists and everything else that we're going to have to figure out soon. But once we get past that, it's kind of like it's kind of like when clothing went to machine made. At first, everybody wanted it made by machine. Now, if it's handmade, holy cow, is it different? Even from, I was just talking to somebody about, everybody buys ripped jeans now. We were embarrassed when I was a kid because our moms would patch them. Now you'll pay $150 extra if they're patched by a machine, but we're trying to buy that authenticity that, I wore these out, even though we didn't. You know what I mean?
Yes,
yeah.
yes. And one of the things that really amazed me was at the roof of Notre Dame, which took about 1,500 trees, some 80 feet tall, that they had to use from the old state forests for the great buildings to make this roof. 1,500 trees, and most of them were cut by hand using axes. 1,500 trees. They had 60 men working for 3 or 4 years, cutting these trees and then forming them into square timbers and then joining them with dovetails and mortise and tenons. And it was all handmade.
How did they get this done? I mean, the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. took forever. How did they do this so fast?
Well, I think it was national pride, and it shows you that the French still have it in them to restore, but I also believe build things of that quality of the Middle Ages. They still have it. They have the people that love it. And even though the elites and the leadership, the political leadership don't think it's valid, but the regular people and the craftsmen, they know this was a high point. This is a golden age, and that we could do it again today. So I'm very excited about the French. I want to export the French, these master craftsmen, to other countries, especially the U.S., where we can afford it, and get them to train us and lead us to do this in America on a smaller scale or whatever. But I think we want to do that.
Duncan, thank you. If you're ever in Dallas, please let me know. I'd love to have lunch with you sometime. You're fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you for what you do, Ben.
You bet.
And thank you for speaking up.
You got it. Duncan Stroik, he is an architect and the professor of architecture at the University of Notre Dame.